Welcome back to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker. She is your real estate voice, and this is the weekly radio show that informs and educates you on how to buy or sell real estate with Barb Schlinker, the owner broker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. Now, Barb, when buyers do a home inspection, typically they're checking to see if the home has a functional condition. What are the most common issues that arise on inspections, and how can sellers be prepared for that inspection?
Well, the probably the biggest frustration for most home sellers is this phase of the sale. They're all real happy when they have a contract. Woohoo, I'm going to closing, getting the finish line, pretty much already spending their net proceeds on something, a house or whatever. And that's great. However, the buyer is going to do an inspection, and it's more than likely, even the homes that are in really, really good condition, the inspector is going to find something and they're going to ask for stuff. And the unfortunate part of this process is in the state of Colorado, there is no license to be a home inspector. I could be a home inspector, and the only thing I know how to do is maybe run a screwdriver a little bit, but at the end of the day, there's no qualification. Now, the state's starting to stick their toe into certifying inspectors these days. One of the things that they do license is to test for radon. Radon is the natural radiation that emanates from granite decomposing. And the EPA has established this measurement called a picocure. And if it's more than 4 picocures, some buyers will ask for the radon levels to be mitigated. And so the way they do that is they take a big plastic PVC pipe, stick it in the perimeter drain, stick a fan in it, and theoretically it blows the radon out the roof or out through that big 4-inch pipe, or actually it's like a 6-inch pipe. They're kind of ugly. And so generally the cost of that system runs about $1,200 to $1,300 on most homes. And typically these contractors can get the levels down below EPA standards. Most of them will guarantee it. So that test itself is now requiring a license. And then the latest thing is for VA loans, to get a VA loan, the lenders all of a sudden started requiring termite inspections, even in Colorado. We don't really have termites here. They don't, at least they're not natural. Like they'll come in, brought in on pallets to grocery stores and things like that. And that's how they kind of spread and enter into some houses. But the state they're kind of created this certification to check for termites, but that's something new. And it's something to consider if your buyer is getting a VA loan. Now, as far as agent behavior around inspections, that's very interesting. According to state license law for real estate agents, we cannot let somebody in a home without permission. That's license law. But for some reason, the agents tend to not want to go to inspections. I think a lot of them think it's a waste of their time. And so a lot of them will ask me, well, can't you just give out the combo to my unlicensed inspector and let him in the house for 3 hours going over all the systems, even occupied homes? And I'm like, no, we can't do that. First of all, it invalidates my insurance. And generally, they're going to spend 3 hours in the home touching just about every system. And so I've kind of directed agents to go, hey, either you or your team are going to have to be there for the inspection. And if they can't, I'm going to be there for my client. The other thing I have them do is they will try to kick the sellers out of their own home for the inspection. I'm like, you can't tell somebody to leave their own home. Where does that come from? So it came from the history of the agents being used to having the home to themselves for showings. And now they think they get to have the homes to themselves for the inspection. And that's not necessarily the case. And what I find is many of these inspectors on their report will try to impose today's building code on newer homes, or they just won't understand the systems and they'll do some crazy stuff. So I insist that the buyer's agent or the representative will be there. And if they won't, then we have to be there to protect our clients. And I tell the clients, don't be surprised if the inspector comes up to you and asks you to leave. The answer is no, no. If you guys want to go talk privately, you can do that somewhere else. And it does say in the state contract that the home is sold as is, where is, with all its faults. However, the buyer can inspect anything they want. So there's a whole bunch of systems that they scrutinize. And I put some restrictions on that. In fact, I got into like a 10 o'clock at night multi-term paper length text battle with a real estate agent just about a week ago over whether or not we can say that the inspector could check the sewer line. I've had so many problems with these inspectors coming in and messing with sewer lines that I said, that's it, no more. If they want to check that system, that's fine. I understand that. But they need to bring a plumbing company that knows what they're doing. So some of the systems that these guys are going to check out, or girls, could be a girl, is a furnace, air conditioner, water heater. They'll look at the permit history. GFCI, that's that little electric circuit that has a circuit breaker on it, essentially, that if those circuits overload, it pops. New code requires a GFCI just about everywhere there's water, but old code or legacy homes are grandfathered in. They don't have to have that, but some inspectors will ask. There's a certain brand of electric panel, Federal Pacific, that's basically been terribly banished online. If you go Google Federal Pacific panel, it will terrify you. And it's in about a third of the houses in this market. So almost every buyer asks for a new panel. That could be very expensive. But my experiences that I've had with inspectors have been just absolute craziness. I've had inspectors go to a house, turn every single faucet on inside and out, and run it for 4 hours. And that's on a property with a well. And they ended up sucking the well dry and sucking sand up through the well pump, through the plumbing fixtures, into the sink and the tub. And of course, then the inspector talks the buyer out of the house saying the well is not performing. It performed great. It's just that there's only so much the tank can hold before it has to replenish. I've had them, these big guys go up in the attic and stick their foot or their bottoms, through the drywall, stepping in the wrong place and crack the drywall. I've had them drop things in sewer lines. I've had them pop circuit breakers of things like freezers. So after an inspection, you need to go and check all these things to make sure they didn't turn systems off. I've had many of them pull toilets without a permission. The picture I'm showing you right now was hilarious. So I told the agent that, if they're going to pull a toilet to check a sewer line, this is when I allowed inspectors to do it, they need to bring a plumber. So did they do that? No, completely ignored it. I don't even think she read this thing that I sent her. So on the inspection objection, we get a objection that says the basement toilet is missing. And when I presented that to the seller, he's like, well, that's kind of funny because I think I used that toilet yesterday. It can't be missing. So he went downstairs, and when he came back up, he shared this picture with me. So what the inspector had done is pulled the toilet. He found a silicone bath mat and just drug it over underneath his knees so he was all comfy. But then when he re-secured the toilet, and he probably didn't even replace the ring, the bath mat was stuck under the rim of the toilet. And so that's what we discovered. And we're like, oh my God. So we pretty much, got real strict with that buyer and said, look, if you go through with this sale, because it's not a done deal until after you've resolved inspection and appraisal and you're cleared to close, and they close, right? There's all these steps to the process. If you go through, or if you change your mind about buying this house, before we release the earnest money back to you, you're going to bring in a plumber and correct this. And so they went ahead and bought the house anyway. But I've had inspectors tear apart pedestal sinks. I've had inspectors leave some kind of screwdriver thing stuck in the wood. They just stuck it in the wood and said, oh, there's wood rot. When they first started doing sewer scopes, Instead of removing the toilet, they would run their scopes down through the toilet and through tubs and damage these things. And my favorite, all-time favorite, is all of the stupid gadgets that the inspectors have. Carbon monoxide detectors, which are not properly handled and properly calibrated. I've had these inspectors scare a buyer from a house thinking there was something wrong with the furnace, which there wasn't. His stupid detector of carbon monoxide wasn't working right. They like to use these infrared, I don't know if they're infrared, they're heat scanners that measure temperature. And they assume based on that temperature change that there's a plumbing leak. Well, I've had these inspectors identify an alleged plumbing leak in a wall, behind a wall, where there was no plumbing. I've had them use these pressure gauge to measure water pressure where they weren't properly calibrated. We got into a big cat fight over that. And my favorite, all-time favorite, is the mold meter, which was so stupid. The guy walked through the house with this wand and said, "Oh, there's mold," which is just false. You actually have to test mold and see how it works. So you really want somebody that has your back in on inspection, and you have to double check everything. So you need some time from the time they object to the time you reach agreement on resolution, verifying it with professionals before you move forward with some of the crazy things these inspectors come up with. My name is Barb Schlinker. I'm the broker owner of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty and the host of this show, Your Real Estate Voice. And we're talking about how you can prevent agents from derailing the contract on home inspections. And next up, we're going to talk about how you can prepare for your home inspection so that it goes smoothly. Richard?
You're listening to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker. She is your real estate voice, host of the program, and the owner proprietor of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. You can reach her at 719-301-3900. So, Barb, what are some other things that a home seller can do to prevent the agent from blowing up that sale?
Well, I would say, first of all, and some sellers do this, and I love when they're prepared because it really gives a lot of ammunition. I can share the preparation with the buyers and they're feeling good about the house. So if they get ahead of it and do things like a roof certification, I probably 1 out of 3 listings that I have to get a new roof because of all the hail damage we have in Colorado. Have the furnace checked out and serviced. Have the sewer line checked. Sewer lines, if they are fractured or broken, it could be a very, very expensive repair, anywhere from, I would say, the low end of 3,000, high end of about 12 to 13,000 to repair a fractured sewer line. You want to know about that, and you want to make sure that you have an opportunity to get bids, because there's a big variety of prices for repairs if you need to do that. And I think that if you wait for the buyer's inspector to do it, the problem is, now you're up against a deadline and you have to scramble to get bids and figure out what it's going to take to get this buyer to the finish line. So one of the things you can do definitely is include a home warranty, especially if you have old systems, old furnaces, old water heaters. These inspectors will actually deem these systems dead based on their age. So they'll say, "Oh, if your water heater is more than 6 to 10 years old, you need a new one." Well, mine lasted over 20 years. So you don't need a new one just because they're old, as if they're not functioning or they're starting to rust or whatever. So you need a professional to look at it and give you a really good opinion. Radon's a good test. Decks, we have a lot of problems with deck rot and stuff like that. Now, on appliances, as long as they work, they're fine. But you should know that refrigerator, washer, dryer are personal property. So if you include them and you don't hire an agent that knows what they're doing about how to protect you if they happen to fail, because it is just a gift to the buyer, you need to have something in the contract that says, "Hey, if this breaks, this is a Prezi. Sorry, I'm not going to repair or replace it." I hate when sellers have to buy a furnace that really, or not a furnace, but like a refrigerator or washer dryer used just because they included it and for some reason it failed during the contract. Furnace is very good to get them fixed. Windows, I would check for any cracks, any breaks, any broken seals. Most buyers are going to ask for repairs. And, there's some crazy stuff that goes on in inspections. I talk about it all the time. My favorite one was the pizza party at the home inspection where the seller was out of town and on their Ring doorbell, they see the pizza girls show up with not one pizza, but 3 pizzas and a bag of wings. So you're like, wait a minute, what? They're calling me and say, what, are they going to squat in my house? I said, so I had to find out what was going on. Apparently the buyer was hungry, but that's just not appropriate behavior. And we include something called a certified pre-owned home program where we help you do all these things. And that way you're prepared when it's inspection time. If you are thinking of making a move, give us a call, 719-301-3900, or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
You're listening to Your Real Estate Voice. That is Barb Schlinker, host of the program. And if you're thinking of making a move, call Barb at 719-301-3900 or visit barbhasthebuyers.com. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll be discussing why now is the best time to sell a rental home in Colorado, plus Barb's hot new listings. Don't miss those.